We'll now turn to our next panel discussion, Geopolitics, Foreign Relations and Transatlantic Affairs, Shaping a Distinct European Role, held in media partnership with Euronews. At a time of shifting global power balances and renewed transatlantic dynamics, this discussion will explore how Europe can define its strategic role on the world stage. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Maeve McMahon, chief anchor at Euronews, where she presents the Europe Today show. Maeve, the floor is yours.
Hi there, good evening, and thank you so much, Alicia, for that very kind introduction, and also for plugging, indeed, our brand new show, Europe Today, which we've kicked off with just 3 weeks ago, so tune in for that, for all your news and analysis on what's going on in the European Union. Indeed, as you heard there, my name is Maeve McMahon. I'm a journalist based here in Brussels for many years, and I'm thrilled. Bruno, you can take a seat just over there. Yeah, perfect. And I'm thrilled to be with you for this very timely conversation that obviously couldn't happen without my esteemed panel who've already taken their seats. So I'll therefore go ahead and introduce them to you. We have here Janusz Lewandowski, a well-known face in the Brussels bubble, of course, the former European Commissioner and now working very hard as an MEP on the Committee for Budgets, of course, a Polish member of the European Parliament from the European People's Party. Lovely to have you with us. And to your right, we have Željana Zovko, Croatian MEP, who's just fresh off the plane from the United States, where you engaged in some busy days of work. You're obviously Croatian MEP, again on the from the European People's Party. You're a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee and also on the Delegation of Relations to the United States. So you've been kept as well very busy of late. We're delighted to have you with us.
Thank you.
And then we have Bruno Lette here, representative of the Belgian Ministry of Defence, an advisor working with the Cabinet of the Minister of Defence, and a former think tanker, obviously working with the German Marshall Fund. Thrilled to see you, Bruno. And speaking of the German Marshall Fund, we're thrilled to have Ian Lesser here with us as well tonight. For your perspective, you're, of course, Ian, the Vice President of the German Marshall Fund, working for years here in Brussels, an American trying to make sure that that transatlantic tie stays alive and well. So a very testing time, I understand, for the GMF today, Ian Lesser. And look, I mean, if anyone has read the news today, you can just think just how timely our conversation is today. We saw President Trump earlier give an exclusive interview to the American outlet Politico with a very strong message for Europe, for Europeans, saying that we're a decaying group of nations led by weak people. This comes just 3 or 4 days after last Friday when the National Security Strategy was published. Did anyone have a chance to read it? Yeah. About half the room. I mean, yeah, as a European, not exactly the most digestible read, perhaps, with a lot of strong messages in there as well for Europe. And also, we had, which caught a lot of my attention this weekend, the Elon Musk versus Brussels spat. Yeah, you're nodding there. So, of course, last Friday, we saw the European Commission use their strength and issue the very first fine under the Digital Services Act, 120 million euros, which actually is not that much, but for Elon Musk, it was enough to go onto X, onto his platform, and call for an abolishment or to dismantle the European Union. We saw, of course, Medvedev in Moscow adding a little tweet going exactly in full agreement. And of course, zooming out of the news and the noise of the past few days, we have a European Union as well, very much sandwiched between the US and China. So really it's a time now for the EU to decide how it can remain relevant. And that is the question that I will be putting to my esteemed panels tonight. So I will take a seat here beside Ian Lesser and kick off perhaps with ladies first, yourself. Yeah? If you can tackle that question.
I think, of course, ladies can tackle everything hot.
I totally agree.
I don't think that we are at the height of our transatlantic friendship at this moment, but we have, first of all, to make a conclusion. Where do we want to see ourselves in the future? And I think that analysis of Europe and situation in which Europe finds itself after the aggression on Ukraine and after all the hardship that we have to endure and still to preserve our unity is the question that can be sent as reply to President Trump what Europe is going through at this moment. So our communication strategy, and I would welcome tonight's program and especially the guests, is of the essence. We have not communicated enough the issues that we had to deal with. Last night we had successfully concluded the trialogue on Omnibus. First of the, I would say, obstacle that our businesses have found themselves in, and one of the obstacles that American businesses in European Union have struggled with for many years. We are doing business in improving Europe. But at the same time, in parallel, we are trying to improve and to maintain the bridges with the United States. I was for a week at the IDU meeting in Washington, and I've seen some congressmen. I spoke to people in American administration, and my conclusion is that America is doing their business as well to answer to the challenges that their workers are finding themselves in, the difficulties of high inflation, the upcoming, I would say, midterm elections, and also defining who will be running in these elections. And we should not shy away of the fact that sometimes, I mean, I spent my youth in UK, and I miss dearly UK because they had this a sense of self-criticism, which is, and this Anglo-Saxon approach to self-criticism we don't have enough. And this is something that Americans should understand as well when they are dealing with us. But this strategy that was published, at least, is a strategy that we can understand what they think of us at this moment.
So you feel there's a sense of complacency, perhaps, here. But we'll come back to you later, and also on what you mentioned about the communicating of the EU, is, of course, because it seems the Americans don't really understand what exactly the EU is. I mean, if President Trump wants to call the EU, he goes bilaterally, he calls one of the heads of state. But we'll come back to Ian and perhaps bring you in for your perspective really on this idea of how the EU can stay relevant on the world stage.
Good afternoon. We are living through unthinkable, and we should adjust to unthinkable. A full-scale war on our continent back was unthinkable. President of the United States that is not only unpredictable, but the first one since Cold War not committed to stronger, united, democratic Europe, that was unthinkable. Therefore, Europe has to redefine itself and its place in the world of unfriendly geopolitics. Power politics are back. No illusions about the safeguards built after the war. There was American initiative like United Nations, International Criminals, World Trade Organization. This was American initiative, and now they are helpless. I am not in favor of redefining deeply a relationship with America. We have to adjust to Trump as he is and will be until 2028. American choice. We have to adjust, and I think our leaders in Europe have already mastered what I would name user Trump manual, to appease and not to confront. And our no retaliation against customs of Trump is the best illustration. No confrontation, because trade war would be much more costly for us. But generally, our response is strategic sovereignty with clear military dimension, and our efforts nowadays, to name, I would borrow from masterpiece of Proust. We are à la recherche of the temps perdu. We are in search of lost time. Such a big underinvestment for decades, and now we are hurrying, buying a lot. We are actually increasing dependence upon America on technology and equipment, so this is not quite strategic sovereignty in these terms, but this is irreversible. Militarization also of the European budget I am not happy about it, but this is inevitable and irreversible.
Inevitable and irreversible, and we have to adjust to Donald Trump. We'll come back to that point in a while, but first let's bring in the opening remarks from Bruno Lette.
Well, just to build up on what I just heard, I think it might be tempting for some to now see the United States as the antagonist, but I don't believe that reacting with an offended soul is a good reaction here. Actually, I do not believe that the United States is abandoning us. I actually think that it's this document that was just published recently, it's maybe an inconvenient mirror to the Europeans, and frankly speaking, some of the content, or at least a lot of the content in that document, should not come as a surprise to us. Maybe we don't like the language, but the content should not come as a surprise. Three things I see here. One is about our security, European security. Basically, the United States is asking, take care of yourself. You know, NATO needs to become more European, and this is not a new message. That message has been given to us for over a decade already, so nothing new there. The second big message in the document is about our economy, our growth, our competitiveness. There, the United States, you know, I can understand how they see Europe. You know, the share of Europe's share of global GDP has been dropping significantly due to perhaps over-regulation, non-competitiveness, etc. Well, the United States keeps growing, actually. The gap between the United States and Europe is becoming bigger. How is that possible? Maybe we should look in the mirror. And thirdly, it's about Ukraine. If we want to achieve peace, security, but also prosperity in Europe, we need to fix Ukraine. Now, we might perhaps not agree now on how to fix Ukraine. That perhaps we can argue, but Ukraine needs to be fixed. And that, of course, is a challenge now, I think, also in transatlantic relations, that we converge on the solution.
And I really want to come back to that point on Ukraine and also to the comments that President Trump made earlier in that interview regarding Ukraine and, of course, the European seat around the table. But first, perhaps to yourself, Dr. Ian Lesser, for your thoughts on this idea of Europe finding itself and, of course, a reaction to the National Security Strategic Document.
No, thank you. Good to be with you. I mean, I very much agree with what I've heard so far, I have to say. I mean, I'm saying this as not only as a
not all here to
former
agree.
colleague, but no, you know, as an American sitting in Brussels, I mean, I have to say, I mean, we are in some sense both facing extraordinary challenges across the Atlantic, some of them very similar, actually. If you read that document, what bothers people, of course, is the highly ideological content in it, and what seems to be a kind of interference in internal politics in Europe. And now, the United States, of course, let's be honest, has a history in the Cold War of doing just that. The difference is that, you know, at the time it was in the service of a kind of liberal democratic orientation. This has a different sort of flavor to it. But leaving that aside, I think, you know, there is a sense in which what we've heard from the Trump administration, and it's also was evident in J.D. Vance's speech, the Munich Security Conference, is reminding Europeans, I think, of things that were already troubling and of concern here. So about competitiveness, about the ability of the continent to defend itself, about underinvestment and slow growth, and all of these kinds of things. So that's not new. The burden-sharing piece of it also, as you say, Bruno, is not new. Multiple administrations have brought that to Europe. The style is very different now. And I would say that's a very important point, because the style actually matters. If you read carefully in that document, there are things there that, minus the ideological content, Europe might find reassuring. There's an acknowledgement of the scale of the economic relationship across the Atlantic, a sense of affinity, and all sorts of other things. What is more disturbing? The ideological part, but also, where is Russia in all of that? Not much. Not much. And so there is also, of course, this focus on the Western Hemisphere, which we could talk about. But, you know, what I find a little bit troubling is something slightly different. It's that in the sense of priorities conveyed there, the really existential ones are much lower down the list. Russia, China, etc. You know, final point just on Ukraine. I think, you know, there is a big difference in perspective here, which is underscored in this document and the negotiations. For the Trump administration, I think Ukraine is a problem to be taken off the table so they can move on to other things. And it's seen very much as a thing of its own. Here, it is inevitably and rightly, I think, connected to the future of Europe's security with an aggressive Russia. That's where the real gap is.
That's where the real gap is. And just on Ukraine, we heard President Trump just yesterday making comments, negative comments about President Zelensky, suggesting that he hadn't even read the latest plan. Of course, the Europeans are still not even around the table. Perhaps, Mr. Lewandowski, your thoughts here on how the Europeans should wiggle their way on around the table, perhaps using the leverage of the frozen Russian assets, but that's still politically frozen, if you like, and will be perhaps until the EU Council summit taking place next week.
Yes, we are the biggest sponsor. The last Congress bill of America was spring 2024, and now what is coming is the last instance of agreed borrowing. So if we are the biggest sponsor, close to 180 billion euro for Ukraine, military equipment, humanitarian aid, simply making possible statehood of Ukraine alive, public services, for example, in Ukraine, so much dependent upon our money. That is why we should be more interested than anyone else to make Russia responsible financially and not Ukraine or European taxpayers. Therefore, already windfall profits, okay, taken, assets frozen without disturbing very much euro. But now what is at stake in two variants is really to go for frozen asset as a sort of pledge for loans for Ukraine. I know that we failed to convince our continents. There was clear no from Japan, for example.
Indeed, on the G7 call last night.
So we should count upon ourselves now, say, in this. And of course, Belgian government is protesting, not only Belgian government, ECB, Madame Lagarde is also with some skepticism. But I think if this is very much creative engineering, this is really equilibristic, financial equilibristic, not to take legally assets of Russia, of State Bank of Russia, but make it as a pledge for loans. I think we should go for it because we are more and more responsible for Ukraine. I have to say, I was sent after Polish reforms by World Bank to Ukraine in the 90s, and I came back depressed. This was absolutely corrupt country, wasting 2 decades of independence, while Slovakia or Poland were really developing. But now I am impressed with technological capacity also. We should learn a lot from them technologically, as for the drones and advanced modern technology. But really, if we are so much responsible, and I am so close to this war, we have a feeling of war, but it's not for Portugal, for Spain, but for Croatia, Poland.
Or Ireland,
this is
very
sensible.
far away geographically. Yeah.
I think we should find this equilibristic possible, just also as a communication to Kremlin. But there's also narrative. It's not only about money.
Do the Americans support that reparations loan?
I think they'll support anything that they don't have to pay for. That's the short answer. I know.
Even though it could upset their relations with the Kremlin.
Well, it depends how it's done. I honestly, I think it's sort of inconceivable that Europe will have made this enormous and substantial investment so far in Ukraine's security, in its prosperity, in its future, and will continue to do so, and not figure out a way how to do this. I think that would be supported in Washington, absolutely. I think they would see their own practical interest in it. Perhaps they would prefer not to see it done with Russian assets, but many in the American foreign policy establishment have actually argued very strongly for that.
You're not Bart de Wever, of course, the Belgian Prime Minister. He's been keeping a low profile, but he did have dinner last week with Friedrich Merz, who dashed to Brussels and changed his plans in order, Bruno, to try and get him on board, really, with this reparations loan. Now, I know you're a diplomatic advisor, but do you think that they will give in to the kind of legal concessions that the Commission is trying to look into here?
It's okay. I'm the Belgian in the room. I knew this question was coming.
Yeah.
It's okay.
We're all waiting to know.
No, look, let's be frank here. First of all, this is a very bitter situation for my country. We are a staunch supporter of Ukraine. We contribute financially, humanitarianly since the very beginning, and not small amounts. So this is a very bitter situation because basically my country now needs to choose to either help Ukraine or to bankrupt my own country. That's the choice we face. So this is a very difficult situation. First of all, and secondly, this is not a new situation. Let's also be honest on that. This discussion has been going on for the past 6 months, 7 months. Belgium has been around with our EU partners all this time already. We were aware of the situation, and we've been asking all this time already, the past 6, 7 months, for guarantees. So in public, our partners are saying, yes, of course, Belgium, we will give you the guarantees that you're asking for. No problem, we will help you, your country will not go bankrupt, don't worry. We're like, okay, great, so here's a piece of paper, please sign the guarantees. Oh, no, we cannot sign that piece of paper, that's not possible. So we're like, okay, but then what's the problem here? So that's number one. Number two. Number three is that let's also not forget Belgium is not the only country with frozen Russian assets. No, we just happen to have the biggest pot, and it's not a blessing, by the way. I mean, if someone else, this country wants it, please, where can we move Euroclear, please? Happily. You know, France has a couple of billions, and France just announced, no, we will not unfreeze the assets. Italy has a couple of billions, announced the same. No, we will not. But everyone's asking, oh, but you, Belgium, you can do it. So the situation is a bit twisted, if I may say so. So again, Belgium is not against, let me repeat that, we are not against giving the Russian frozen assets. We're just asking from our partners guarantees. But each time we put a legal document under our partner's nose, they refuse to sign. So
there's absolutely no way this deal will be sealed by the summit next week, even though the President Costa has said that leaders will not be leaving the room until they clinch a deal on this. What's your view here?
I mean, Croatia does not hold any frozen assets, just to make sure. I mean, we encourage you strongly.
And neither do the 10 countries who wrote the letter this week to the Commission
and
saying we should
our Prime Minister is just buying, you know, the military equipment from France and from Germany, so we are increasing also military expenditure. As I was in Washington, I discussed with them as well their serious issue, and that's their problems with the budget as well, because they feel that they will bankrupt. And some of the congressmen were complaining to me that they have a huge issue that we are not also discussing here. So it looks to me that the health situation of our budgets is not so encouraging, and poor Ukrainians will have to rely on the solidarity as well and on the compassion. But as a country that went through the war and we were not helped by anyone, and we even had the arms embargo on Croatia, my government and my Prime Minister is standing strongly with Ukraine, and we think that it's a matter of common sense that it's our security. It's not American security. It's European security. So I believe that at the Council, and I believe that our Prime Minister also will influence some sort of middle way to find in order to help Ukrainians survive, because we are going to fail altogether if they fail. And that's the message from, it's not only about Polish borders, it's about Western Balkan, it's about southern borders, and it's not only Ukraine, it's the message that we are going to send if they fail in their defense.
Well, there is, of course, a plan B on the table, but a number of other member states don't agree on that. So it certainly will be a nail-biting EU summit taking place next week. So stay tuned for that. Going back, though, to Ukraine and support for Ukraine, Mr. Lewandowski, how can the Europeans make sure that Ukraine, and we've seen how visibly exhausted President Zelensky is. He was just last night in Brussels, he was in London, he was in Dublin last week, he's in Rome today. How can the Europeans make sure that he doesn't have to accept a bad deal?
We are trying our best. We have all suspended some funds for Ukraine. because they were ready to change their legislation, giving more discretionary power to Zelensky. But now they are coming back to what we are demanding. So, of course, this is a question of monitoring, but I am trying to understand people who are under daily attacks, how to conduct state business. We have never experienced conducting state business in time of war. And that is, I am responsible in the steering committee also for the investment in Ukraine, and we are monitoring very closely. They are conscious, given the history of 2 decades of corrupt state, really very much corrupt state. This is not so easy to get out of this. So they are conscious that our assistance is conditional. But this is really for survival of health service, not only for military, but this is statehood in terms of war. I have to say that after being so much depressed during my first stay in Ukraine, they are impressing me, really.
So you're pleased, did you feel that it was a positive move then to see Andriy Yermak step down just 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, that is also, for me, this is a proof that they are acting, The closest ally of Zelensky.
His right-hand man, indeed. So just going back to these attempts to try and end the war in Ukraine, Ian Lesser, we heard from President Trump today in that interview to Politico in DC that he said he was on the verge, of pulling out of Ukraine. We heard as well from his son-in-law saying similar comments yesterday. What exactly should we read into this?
It's very hard to know. We know sort of what some of the elements in play here are and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Obviously, President Zelensky came back very strongly saying, look, there are all sorts of things we're willing to accept. What we're not willing to accept is, to give up territory, even territory that we've not already lost. And there will be differences, obviously, between what might make sense in terms of, the line of contact and a kind of de facto acknowledgement of facts on the ground in the service of some bigger security objective for Ukraine, and somehow compromising de jure on the legality of this change of border by force. I think, nobody wants that. And I think even on Capitol Hill, President Trump would find a lot of opposition to anything like that. By the way, we have midterm elections coming up in less than a year, and he's got to be looking over his shoulder at that.
Indeed. Bruno, your thoughts on that?
I think we're facing a very dire situation. Look, on multiple fronts. On the battlefield, Russia is gaining territory. Somehow Ukraine is slowing it down, but it's difficult. The Ukrainians are doing their best they can. Right now the estimation is that the Ukrainians are taking out about 30,000 Russian troops per month, dead or wounded, which is huge. It's the size of the Belgian army, basically, every month. So they're really doing what they can, but they face huge challenges in terms of personnel. There's not enough men and women in uniform, and they lack capabilities. So it's a very dire situation. On top of that, Russia's defense industrial capacity is soaring up. Russia's war economy is delivering in a way. Look at their production of drones. I think they will even surpass Ukraine soon. And we also see the result of that. Every night there are attacks on Ukraine, especially on energy infrastructure, which causes problem of electricity and heating for normal Ukrainian citizens. I do not believe there is a military solution to this conflict. When we talk about we will vanquish Russia, I think we should think twice about that. What does that mean, actually? So my country wants to have a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. It has to be just, that's for sure. So what we can do, in my opinion, are 2 things. We need to make sure that Ukraine's negotiation power is confirmed on the battlefield. We need to make sure that on the battlefield they are strong enough that they can negotiate through strength. So that means we need to help them with capabilities. That's number 1. Number 2 is sustaining the sanctions regime. Actually, sanctions do work. on the Russian economy. The problem, of course, is that the Russian economy has been split in two. There's a civilian Russian economy, which is badly hit by the sanctions. And then there's a war economy, where a very big chunk of the Russian budget is going to. And let's be frank, the Chinese are not innocent in that either. So, effective sanctions would be, of course, to look at third parties in the energy sector, but that's a whole different conversation. But again, we believe in a just and lasting peace, but I do not believe there's a military solution to this conflict.
Do you agree?
Yes, although I wanted to change from Ukraine to something I think I should deliver to you as the best illustration of how geopolitics are changing our priorities. And I have a best illustration with so-called military mobility. So-called Connecting Europe Fund is existing since 1996. But nobody was thinking about dual use. Nobody was thinking since Cold War about delivery of heavy vehicles and so on. In this respect, we are really in search of lost time. And the best illustration is coming because the agreement over financial perspective 2021 to 2027 was done before the aggression. And what was cut? Military mobility. Proposal by the Commission, 6.5 billion euro. What we have now, 1.7 billion euro. But how it is changing our atmosphere and priorities, again, illustration with conciliation over 2026 budget. Nobody was contesting top-ups for military security and mobility. In the next financial perspective, this is growing tenfold. And I wanted to deliver that illustration of how geopolitics are really changing Europe, revitalization of Euro budget. I was entering Europe as a Poland, and not only Poland, as a purely pacifistic project. And I am not very happy about it, about what is going on, but this is inevitable.
This is the reality. Yeah, it's interesting, the reality indeed. And also the EU enlargement has made a comeback. That's another topic very much on the table because of the geopolitical situation we find ourselves in. Just going back, perhaps, Elena, to this idea of rearming Europe by 2030, is that the answer to make sure that Europe plays a role and is heard then on the world stage?
I mean, we are not taken seriously on the world stage.
We are?
No, we are not.
We are not, exactly.
We are not
so could this help
seriously.
if we transition from a soft power to a military power?
No, but at least we have to be able to defend ourselves. This is the first premises of being taken seriously. I mean, we are the world power in giving the money, in financing UN, in financing development aid, in financing whatever programs and projects you can imagine in the world. But if somebody hits us, we call Americans or we call UK, and we ask them as well to participate in our programs. So we are not being taken seriously. Enlargement is one of the good tools. In the meantime, while we are rearming ourselves and while we are doing this military mobility, by the way, this is going to pass as well in a plenary next Strasbourg session, to connect our military so that to be able to transport one tank from Spain to Poland. But in the meantime, enlargement is the best asset as well for protection, because we have military from Western Balkan participating in our peace mission. We have also Ukrainians. I mean, we should not shy away to say they're the best trained soldiers nowadays. Who is better trained than Ukrainians? And I mean, if there are any left, because I'm so sorry about these poor guys. I mean, my brother was fighting. And I know how difficult it is for them and how difficult it will be after the war and what we will do with them. I mean, they will be engaged either in military or in some sort of mercenaries. So we have to engage them. We have to get them on board. And so we have a trained army. We have, even in Western Balkan, we have a very, very well-trained army, and we have also experts on this military. But nowadays, we have to also agree with our military industry who's going to produce what, and how to and how to make agreement as well, and how to get United States involved in this, because we cannot do without United States for the time being.
Well, that's why I'm really curious to hear from Ian Lesser on that. But I'm also looking around the room as well. If there's anyone who'd like to jump in, get involved in the conversation, put a question, put a point, put up your hand. We'll bring you a microphone while we just get you to address that point that Selena made.
No, I think the points that have been made about this, both about military mobility and the bigger one that you've made about rebuilding defense are hugely important. I mean, I would just worry a little bit that a lot of this debate in Europe at the moment is much more about industrial policy than it is about defense, actually. And beyond that, there is a problem which is hard to solve, which is that there is not, in a sense, a common strategic culture about the use of force in Europe. It's one thing to spend more money, and you're quite right, Europe is quite good at that. But it's quite another to be able to use force in a way that you need to do, and to staff militaries, to have the personnel. Look how controversial it's been to discuss enlist, mandatory conscription and or even voluntary.
This is a fascinating debate.
I mean, that's a fascinating part of it, but that's a big difference across the Atlantic, and I totally agree with you. Far better not to have to consider doing this with an absence of the United States altogether. One could go on about that, but I think it's absolutely essential. And again, we have midterm elections in less than 12
months. You keep repeating that.
I'm going to keep repeating that because it makes a difference.
And interesting how you said that we were not able to defend ourselves. I'm thinking of that incident a few weeks ago in the Belgian airport, or there was the drone incursions buzzing around Doel, and of course the Belgians, they had to call the Brits for the support that time. But I see we have a lot of questions from the audience, which is very exciting. So if you just don't mind standing up and perhaps telling us your name and perhaps where you're from or who you represent. Does somebody have the microphone? Yeah, go ahead.
Michael Elmer. I'd like to return to the question of how Europe can help Ukraine in terms of manpower, because we haven't touched on that. And the particular question I would be interested to hear the views of the panel on. In the UK, it is theoretically against the law to take part in foreign wars. In practice, this has been winked at the moment in the case of Ukraine, and there are British former servicemen fighting with the Ukrainian Foreign Legion. I would like to know from Mr. Lewandowski or perhaps Mr. Lette if they are aware that an appeal for leniency has been made to countries who have similar laws so that they will facilitate or at any rate not hinder the attempts by trained soldiers, formerly who served in those armies, to go to the assistance of the Ukrainian Foreign Legion. And since we have an Irish moderator, I'll give an example of what we don't want to see. During the Second World War, many thousands of Irishmen fought valiantly with the British Army. But it's only very recently that that has been recognized by the laying of a wreath by the Irish ambassador at the cenotaph. And one of my neighbors, now dead, God rest him, who was a member of the Irish, the Free State it was in those days, armed forces, deserted to join the British Army and was pursued for decades by the Irish authorities and denied a pension until very late in his life. We want a willingness to let people go, not a niggardly attempt to hold that up.
Thank you so much, sir, for your great question there about how we can support Ukraine more with manpower. I mean, there has been talk of sending peacekeepers on the ground. Should we take another question there? Hi. Good to see you.
Thank you. Sevinç Kader. I'm a board-level geopolitical strategist and expert on AI governance. It's a quite interesting debate for me because so from different angles of geopolitical world, where Europe is really standing for, we see through this debate. However, there are a couple of points I want to raise and would love to hear your view on this as well. United States is blocking Europe's competitiveness, undermining Europe's competitiveness in many domains. One of them is AI. in the global AI race, when we look at actually Europe has a very important leverage, which is the semiconductor equipments only produced by a European company, which is 100% in the world at that level, at that quality. However, American administration actually pressurized a European country, EU member country, to control the export limitations as well. Okay. So this is very much, my question is coming. My question is how Europe is really planning to leverage their potential and this kind of important geostrategic potential and the position. The second one is, in all this debate, you did not mention Turkey at once. Turkey is the second largest NATO country, European country, part of Western Bloc. Maybe more importantly as well, is the only country who can really talk to Trump administration better than anyone else in the EU.
We've only 1 hour. There's only so much we can discuss, but indeed, Turkey we will mention after. We'll take a third question, and then we'll go to the panel, and then we'll go straight to you. Okay?
Yeah, I'm Patrick Pennings. I'm the Secretary General of the European Seniors Union. So we're not only the Seniors Union, which is linked to the EPP. I just wanted to come back to the question of corruption in Ukraine, because there was an assessment made by the GRECO, the Group of States Against Corruption, and it stated that 18 out of the 31 recommendations that were made by GRECO were fulfilled or partially fulfilled. Now you may say this is little, 18 out of 31, but just a short reminder is that Malta, which was recently assessed, 1/3 was totally not fulfilled of the criteria, and 1/3 was only partially fulfilled. So when we point at Ukraine in times of war, I think it is important to remember that. I visited many times Ukraine, and President Zelensky has had enormous effort to combat corruption. So I think it's important to keep that into account, and it should not lead us astray from the real discussions that we're having on this.
Thank you so much, sir, for your question. So we can divvy them out here, if you like, among the panelists. Selena, did you want to address that last question?
No.
You didn't?
I don't want to.
I thought you looked like you wanted to jump in.
No, I would address this question of semiconductors and of Americans limiting. I think it was it came from Biden administration, and I was involved as I'm on the interpart dealing with US. EU on taking off the sanctions, these limits and controls over imports of chips and and critical raw material. I think that America has this strategic approach at this moment. I'm not the advocate. Probably you should be in a better position than me to explain. But on this real strategic material and decoupling from China and for what purposes all these materials is used, and we are negotiating. I was in a state of Secretary of Trade cabinet talking about the issues that are really pending between us, and I think that we need to relax and also to explain our strategy towards China and towards some other authoritarian countries that are not so benevolent in these future challenges that we are going to take. And I would not really link this, as you said, there will be midterm elections, but there are some points that all the administration previous, starting from Obama to Trump, have addressed to us. We have not been dealing with it, but Trump's administration is much more less diplomatic and much more brutal in this addressing. And on the question of Turkey, I think that they have many challenges in the societies that they should deal with, and I would not touch upon that. But I think that Turkey has many issues as a NATO member country. That's why we have this European also pillar of NATO that we want to defend, and that is important for us.
And interesting how you mentioned the Biden administration. I mean, it wasn't all plain sailing either, the transatlantic relationship, but of course, Trump has shaken things up perhaps with his more transactional approach. Mr. Lewandowski?
I can only agree that while we are evaluating Ukraine in terms of rule of law and transparency, we are not perfect in Europe. And at least one prime minister was building oligarchic system with use of Euro funds, that is Orban. He exploited until that were frozen, but for many years he was building his own oligarchy with our European funds, really. As for the question on manpower for Ukraine, I am not going to go deeply because it cannot be fully public. Of course, we are training, for example, them on our polygons. We are advising, our advisors and European advisors are present in Ukraine, but this is the end of my story. So I am jumping immediately, shortly to competitiveness. I am living memory old enough to remember fiasco of so-called Lisbon strategy, promising that Europe could be by 2010 the most developed knowledge-based economy. This was a failure. So as a witness of many failures, I now take serious involvement in what we call simplification, getting of too much red, too much bureaucracy that is really costly and bringing nothing. Although I agree with you that the gap since Lisbon between us and the United States is growing. We are called digital colony of American platforms, and if competitiveness is not about funds, this is also about mentality. Trillions of euros are slipping on banking accounts in Europe and not channeled into productive investment.
That's a very interesting point as well. You're making that the Commission is trying to trigger. Would you like to weigh in there briefly? Because I'd really like to go to the floor.
Very briefly, if I may, on two things. On Turkey, I mean, thank you, Turkey. Thank you for raising the point. I mean, look, I think it points to a bigger issue which we only really touched on glancingly, which is, you know, if Europe is going to become a more capable foreign and security policy actor, especially a defense actor, you know, where should this capacity be lodged? And, you know, in my view, it may not surprise you, it should be in NATO. I mean, there should be a stronger European pillar in NATO, no question, and there would be. You know, no matter what the American administration, that would be desirable, I think. But let's if Europe is going to, you know, muster all of these new resources for defense, do it in an efficient way and use what you have already in NATO. And of course, in that frame, Turkey plays a huge role. And especially if things go wrong, you know, things have gone wrong before between Turkey and Russia. You know, we sort of dismiss this, but I think multiple American administrations have understood that that the longer the war in Ukraine goes on, the greater the accumulated risk of something simply going wrong. And the fear about escalation and all the rest of it. You know, it could happen in the Baltic, but it could also happen in the Black Sea, it could happen in the Eastern Mediterranean, it could happen in a lot of different settings. Just a quick point on the AI and this kind of thing, it's hugely important. I mean, there are some structural differences, if I may say, as an American living in Europe, in terms of risk culture in Europe, in terms of the culture around entrepreneurship. Not all of these things can be fixed through investment. If we didn't have such a stressed relationship across the Atlantic, perhaps these wouldn't seem so dire, because we would have things like TTIP, and we would have other things like that. We'd have a totally different conversation.
Indeed, yeah, I remember those years of
you
the TTIP talks.
TTIP?
Yeah, I've been here long enough. Now, if you'd like to go ahead and give us your question.
Thank you. My name is Zsuzsa Ferenci. I'm with the Martin Center. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I would like to come back actually to the first question, Ms. Zovko, that you actually left open, and I very much would love to hear how you would answer that same question, which is, where do we want to be in the future as Europe? Because I guess the context is pushing us to choose and to kind of go in that direction. You did talk about the ability to defend ourselves, and that's clearly the basis, but if you could elaborate on that, and also in terms of global leadership and Europe's role. And then a quick question to Bruno. You said fix Ukraine. I think I haven't really come across that term in terms of dealing with Ukraine. How would you fix Ukraine?
Thank you so much.
What does that mean to you?
I'll take out my glass and ball.
Well, no, but I'm sure you have your input on that.
So we have another question there in the back, even though I love your question there because it's about looking ahead. So it's a perfect kind of conclusion question because we do have Commissioner Kubilius coming up on stage very shortly. But I'll take another question there and from Fiona there. Yeah.
So I'm
Perfectly,
sorry,
yeah.
I will briefly echo because this is exactly what I wanted to ask, just to give slightly more context. Where is our soft power gone? Because we were such a confident continent, Europe, when we did so well in COVID, and we were the standard maker, and now all of a sudden, after the invasion, we lost all that. So we have to do some soul searching here, and I want to ask the speakers, brilliant speakers, so where do we start? Thank you.
And this is the Ideas Forum, so we really need great ideas from our brilliant speakers. We have one more question there. Is there anyone else on this side? Yeah, man in the red. Oh, we had Fiona first. Okay.
Right, so I'm Peter, entrepreneur from Finland. And I think that it's very important that we not only discuss, we can invest a lot in weapons, and we've decided to do so in Europe. But what we also need to invest in, and I think you hinted at that like it's also about mindset. So who cares if we have all the weapons in the world if we don't have the willingness to defend ourselves? So I'm coming from Finland. I know what to do when Russia attacks, and I say when. My son knows what to do, my friends know what to do. Everybody knows what to do. Everybody. 80% of the population wants to defend the country, not 20% like in Germany. So this is a big problem. And I would like to disagree with, that Belgium has been a staunch supporter of Ukraine. Yes, you have given a little bit. But if you look at the Nordic, the Baltic, Poland, all of us who are actually going to take the first hit, we have to take this very, very seriously. And I would also say here that it's very important that we understand that Ukrainians are dying on our behalf every day. And this is totally against European values that we are not standing up. Yes, we have coalition of the willing and we have meetings and then we decide that maybe we'll do something. And then we're afraid of escalation. So I think that, the question about soft power, for example, now I don't know if you've been following that there are some young people in Russia who are demonstrating against the regime. You had this very brave, courageous young lady, Diana Longinova, that was performing this song for a few hundred people in St. Petersburg, and then she was thrown in jail, and in jail again, and I think now she's deported to Armenia or someplace like that. Why don't we invite her and her band to perform at the Eurovision? And they can represent Russia, and then, that is a proper provocation. It's using our soft power. We need to stop, just like, taking it, again and again and again. I know we need to be careful because, the Russian people might get angry and there's escalation. Okay, so what? Let's see what it goes for, but let's use our soft power and let's stand up for the values that we are supporting here in Europe, because it's all about values.
Brilliant.
So no question, but anyway.
Yeah, great comment. Thank you, sir. And actually bringing some concrete proposals, thank you, and some personal perspective. We'll give you the last question. Hopefully it's brief.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to just thank to Bruno that he really clarified also Belgium's position that this country is not against using the frozen assets or helping Ukraine. Rather, it's an ardent supporter of Ukraine. And by the way, it has also given the largest share of the windfall profits to Ukraine. But in general, the question maybe it's about the MFF budget. So we have a number of priorities, defense, climate, enlargement. So how do we want to finance all these priorities with this current MFF without introducing the new resources?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your question, and thank you for all those who posed a question or a comment. It really made the debate so much more interesting, so thank you so much for that. And now, the challenge will be for our four panellists to try and wrap and answer all those points, and also bearing in mind the question there from the front on looking ahead, and also where is our self-power, where is our self-confidence gone? So who would like to take on the challenge? To start, maybe Bruno?
Yeah. I'll focus so that I can be short. Look, Belgium is donating 0.25% of its GDP to Ukraine, which in some cases is more or similar than Nordic or Baltic countries. But obviously, it's not a competition. I agree that we need to work together to make sure that the financing of Ukraine is sustainable. Next year, for the war effort, Ukraine will need about 120 billion euro just for 1 year. 60 billion will come from the Ukrainian budget itself, but we, the partners of Ukraine, will need to find 60 billion if we really want Ukraine to be able to defend itself adequately. So, coming back to Zsuzsa's question, what is the solution? I think it's going to be very difficult to find one as long as Russia is a revisionist power. You know, what is now on the table in terms of peace plan is you might think of it what you want, but it's an effort to find some sort of peace. But of course, the peace has to be just. We don't want to be having some sort of peace, and then in 3-4 years the situation explodes again. That's not the point. So in that respect, I think we need to make sure Ukraine can fight the fight tonight. That's about capabilities, but also make sure that Ukraine can fight the fight tomorrow. And there, I think industrial policy is very important, where we partner with Ukrainian industries. That does not only have to be in the defense sector, but in all kinds of sectors, where we actually help the Ukrainian economy to stand on its feet. And I think that will be the challenge. But again, with Russia being what Russia is today, as a revisionist power, the challenge is a bit on our side.
It's huge. Ian Lesser?
If I might just pick up on the point about soft power. I mean, it's a hugely important question. But, you know, of course, the answer is it still matters. The part of the problem is that we're now in a world that values hard power in ways that were not the case some years ago. And that's a reality that I think Europe has to live with. It's also a reality the United States has to live with. I would even, in our case, flip the question around and say, you know, what is happening to American soft power? I mean, you can see the effect of this, especially in Europe, you know, on many fronts, you know, whether it's tourism or student visas or many other things. I think we have to be very wary of the consequences of losing that soft power, in a sense, edge that we had. I find that disappointing.
Mr. Lewandowski?
Shortly on financing defense and MFF, rather boring topic. We have first ever commissioner for defense, but he's without money. Everything we are delivering is so-called off-budget. Safe loans, off-budget. Perversive name, peace facility. We are helping Ukraine with peace facility. Very perversive name. This is off-budget. But fortunately, in the next financial perspective, we have special dedicated program, 131 billion euro. It cannot be direct because we have provision in the treaties not allowing to finance directly military equipment, but at least it is coming. And this is a proof that we are adjusting up to our capability. And as our capability, this is rather amazing story of adjusting to the crisis situations, all of them coming from outside. Financial crisis from America, COVID, that was a gift from China. Now this is aggression by Russia, but we are really open project, adjusting to this external challenging. Therefore, I am optimistic about Europe. Let's hope that American Make America Great Again could help to make Europe great again.
That's a very positive conclusion. And you forgot to mention Brexit, which of course was self-imposed. Final words with yourself.
Yeah, I just had to say that I don't have a luxury to be pessimist about Europe and its role in the world. I think that we are making very important relations and friendships with like-minded countries. We are making trade agreements. We are trying to gather all this while we are waiting for United States of America to come to the future government composition in the midterm elections, and while they're finding themselves. But we must understand that multilateral world order as we know it, it's just totally rotten. And I've been ambassador in UN organizations, and for many years it was meant to be changed, reformed, and strengthened. And we have to re-engage with with countries and with that share our values and the rules-based order. But we have to also to acknowledge that we have to take lessons learned from what was broken, to mend it, and to fix it, and to keep that was not broken. And this is where European Union can play a crucial role, and this is where European Union can send a strong message, because still, morally, we are the most accepted in the world as a good project, as a project of peace and reconciliation. And this is what we should keep this card and to play it on.
Okay, Željana Zovko, Janis Lewandowski, Bruno Lette, and Ian Lesser, thank you so much. A round of applause.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for your attention, for all of those as well watching online. Thank you so much for being with us. Do leave a comment underneath. You can, of course, replay it back in your spare time. Thank you, and I will hand back over